my first thing I want to get to is you shared how there's some moments when you're like, man, my testimony isn't as extravagant as Johnny's testimony over here, right? As you shared, you had the blessing of being raised in a Christian household with great parents, from what it seems like. And there is this temptation, at least I felt this, and it sounded like you were kind of alluding to it as well, to think, man, I feel like I need to have a crazier transformation story, right? Like I needed to really go sow my wild oats, really live for the flesh and the world and the devil, and then the Lord will, have a brighter experience on my dark backdrop, right? And it's a common, I think, temptation for good old church boys, right? It's like, man, I need something more. Some people chase after their wild oats just for the sake of doing it, not for the sake of having a great testimony. But sometimes I think there's like maybe even a have you ever heard like someone say that was a great testimony?
Oh yeah.
Right. It was like
100%.
a serious conversion story. They were like a drug dealer and they're like, going crazy, and then they almost got shot, and then they're fine, and then they turn to the Lord and the twinkle of an eye, and then they're like, doing ministry on the streets of Atlanta or whatever, since you're from Atlanta, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're like, what a testimony. My goodness, right? And you're just sitting there thinking, my testimony ain't nothing like that. And you start to think you're inferior, and you start to compare your testimony to those of others. And dare we say that sometimes we discriminate in a way. Testimony is like, his testimony isn't that great. Let's not have him share with the youth. Let's not have him share with the men's ministry. We need someone with a better testimony, right?
Absolutely.
So what do you say to all that? What advice would you give? What's some commentary on what I just shared there?
Well, first off, I think that there is some substance to people who do have the crazy testimonies. I do think a lot of times they can be more edifying. I think they can be more inspiring. They're more entertaining, if nothing else. And with that, I think, like I said, there's something to be said about those kind of Saul to Paul testimonies that really are just incredible stories of how the Lord transformed somebody. But again, like we talked about, not all of us have that.
Yeah.
And, it's like you said, it's hard not to compare because, it's like, oh, I'm so lame.
Yeah.
Like I grew up in the church. I'm so lame. Like I kind of wish I didn't.
Right.
But I mean, that's the way it is.
Yeah.
Like, that's the story that the Lord has given us.
Right.
You and I. And it's just a blessing to walk in whatever story we have.
Yeah.
Might sound cliche, but
no, absolutely. Because every story is important, right? And I think we fall into the trap of comparison, which I think is ironically what the enemy wants us to do. Like, man, James, Logan, you guys are nothing over here. You're just it's a goody two shoes over here, good boys or whatever. Obviously, we're not perfect. At least I'm not perfect. I don't want to speak for you. I've definitely had my downfalls. Maybe they're not as crazy as being a drug dealer, but definitely dealt with some sin. And we play the compare game, and we lose sight of the fact that really it's not about the person sharing at all, actually. It's about God glorifying himself through that person. So really, it shouldn't matter what the features of the story are, because it's all about God to end with. And if someone ever gives and I don't think I've witnessed this firsthand, Logan, but if anyone did give a dramatic testimony for the sake of trying to glorify themselves, we would have to correct them. Every time I've heard a wild testimony, right, it's been very genuine, right? You could tell the person really, honestly, or maybe even ashamed of how wild it was.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
They're like, man, there's nothing fun about this. And honestly, yes, I'm saved and the Lord has redeemed me, but now I have a bunch of baggage from this wild testimony, right? And unfortunately, they have to carry that with them, and they can work through it, obviously, and they're forgiven from it. But it's just, some of that stuff, that baggage doesn't go away. So I don't think a person who's had a wild testimony sitting here just like, thanking their lucky stars that they have an awesome story to share now. If anything, they're broken now, but they see it as an opportunity to bridge build with other people, right? Because someone who has walked through maybe alcohol, drug abuse, women, whatever, has a way to maybe relate to somebody who's walking through that same thing. And again, that's not an excuse for us to go crazy, so we can have some bridge building tools in our tool belt. Like, oh, I want to be able to relate to everybody when I'm older, so let me go ahead and do everything. No, that's you're missing the point there, right?
Right.
And there's obviously pieces of someone's testimony that's out of their control as well. Like you think of a death in the family, a parent, a sibling. That's another piece of a story that, man, can really make a powerful testimony, right? Again, doesn't make the more important than someone who didn't have a tragedy in their life, but it is a great opportunity to steward that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of to that point, it's funny you say, the people who did go through a lot and have a lot of quote unquote baggage that they might be carrying from a life before Christ probably wish that they had our testimony.
Right. Yeah.
And in the same way,
true.
we're sitting here saying, man, it would be so cool to have that kind of testimony.
Right.
But that, again, that's the comparison.
Absolutely.
Comparison's the thief of joy. So,
Ooh, that's good. Comparison to the thief of joy, 100%.